They called me the Gypsy's daughter, even though I wasn't. But names stick, especially when they're whispered behind your back and carved into your school desk. What they never knew, what they never dared to understand, was that the thing they mocked was also the thing that saved lives. I was born in a small town where people remember your last name longer than your first. My father, Ivan, worked at the steel plant, a quiet man with strong hands and tired eyes. My mother, Mirela, was the reason everyone called me Gypsy, even though she hadn't set foot in a camp in 20 years. She left that life behind for love, they say. But the town never let her forget. Our home was small, 2 rooms with peeling paint and a stubborn wood stove that never quite warmed the corners. But it was warm with laughter and stories and the smell of sweet tea and fried dough. My mother wore long skirts and gold hoops even when she wasn't supposed to. She said hiding who you are only gives others more power. I was maybe 8 the first time I knew something I shouldn't have. Our neighbor's boy, Misha, disappeared in the woods one summer afternoon. The whole town searched. I sat on our steps, staring at the trees, and whispered, "He's near the old water tower." They found him there, cold and crying but alive. After that, they stopped calling me by name. They called me the one who knows. My mother never looked surprised. "It comes from my side," she said once, folding laundry. The sight. Some in my family feared it. Others used it. But you must honor it. At first, people came out of curiosity. Then desperation. Sick mothers, missing children, cheating husbands, they sat at our kitchen table and stared into my eyes, waiting for answers. I never lied. I never promised what I couldn't see. And I never took more than a few coins or a loaf of bread. As I grew older, the whispers softened but never stopped. Witch. Gypsy. She'll bring you luck, or curse you. Some neighbors crossed the street when they saw me coming. Others sent their daughters late at night, hoping I'd read their palms in secret. But it was never about money or magic. It was about truth. And then, the truth turned on me. It started with a cough. A small, dry cough that we all blamed on dust from the factory. But it lingered. Then came the weight loss, the fatigue, the way he'd stare at his food like he didn't remember why it was there. We didn't have the money for specialists. The local clinic gave him antibiotics and sent him home. But nothing changed. By winter, my father, Daniel, who used to lift me with one hand and carry groceries in the other, could barely stand up. My mother, Elaine, tried to hide her crying. She started working nights cleaning offices just to afford his medications. I took on more clients, stayed up late reading palms, interpreting dreams, doing whatever I could to help. Then one day, a woman arrived wearing fur and pearls, someone used to being listened to. She asked if I could tell her future. I warned her about a man with kind eyes and cruel intentions. Her hands trembled. She left an envelope stuffed with money. I didn't want it. But I needed it. After that, more people came. Some scared. Some skeptical. Some with money, most without. I never charged much. But I began accepting enough to keep our lights on and food in the fridge. That's when he came. He stepped out of a black car like he owned the world. His name was Charles Whitman, a well-known business mogul. The kind who appeared in business magazines and shook hands with mayors. He didn't waste time. "Someone close is trying to destroy me," he said. "I need to know who." I took his hand. Closed my eyes. What I saw wasn't clear, but it was sharp. A betrayal, close and calculated. There's someone near you who pretends to be loyal. Don't trust him. 3 weeks later, it was all over the news, an attempted takeover. Charles had survived. Barely. He came back, grateful. Offered me a stack of cash so thick it didn't look real. I turned it down. "I helped you because I could," I said. "Not for a price." He stared at me. "That kind of honesty is rare," he said. And dangerous. At home, my father smiled for the first time in weeks when I told him. Live, love, and don't be afraid to go against the world, he whispered, coughing into a cloth. My mother wasn't smiling. She pulled me aside that night and wrapped a red string around my wrist. For protection, she said. You're walking in places people don't want you. But I was still just a girl who thought being good would keep the darkness away. I didn't realize it had already found me. I met him the day the cherry trees bloomed early. The petals rained down like a sign from the universe, and maybe it was. A sign I ignored because I wanted so badly for love to be enough. His name was Nathan. He had quiet eyes, a gentle voice, and a smile that made you feel seen. I met him in the park helping a lost tourist. He watched, then stepped in with better directions. You were close, he said. But not close enough, I smiled. We walked together for a while. He asked to see me again. I should have said no. Should have listened to the uneasy tug in my chest. But I hadn't been looked at like that in a long time. Soon it became coffee dates, bookstore strolls, inside jokes. He loved old poetry and made me feel like I could rest from being the girl who knew things. I didn't tell him about the gift at first. I just wanted to be a girl in love, not the local psychic, not the girl they whispered about. My dad, Daniel, noticed before I even said anything. You look like Elaine did when we first met, he chuckled. Hope looks good on you. My mom was cautious. She watched Nathan like he was a stranger at the door, not a boy in love. When he left, she asked quietly, where are his eyes looking? At me, I replied. She tied a red thread around my wrist. Keep it there, she said. After a few months, Nathan invited me to meet his family. They're a little traditional, he warned. I wore my best dress and brought homemade pastries. His mother opened the door with a smile that felt like a dare. His father barely looked at me. At dinner, the air was thick. Polite questions became sharp. When I mentioned that my mom was Romani, his mother stiffened. We don't need fortune tellers in this family, she said, smiling as she cut her chicken. I looked her straight in the eyes. Good, I said. I didn't bring my cards. Nathan tried to smooth things over outside. She didn't mean it, he said. She's just old-fashioned. Old-fashioned is serving soup before the main course, I snapped. That was hate. He apologized, said he'd talk to them. That it'd be better next time. My father said, if he defends you now, he always will. But my mother just stared at my wrist and whispered, be careful. Silk gloves can hide chains. And I felt it. Even in love, there was danger waiting in the quiet. I thought the worst his family could do was insult me. I was wrong. They didn't just want me gone, they wanted me ruined. And they knew exactly how to make it happen. Nathan tried. At first. He defended me during whispered arguments with his mother, promised things would get better, that his parents would come around. But weeks passed. Then months. The air between us began to shift, so subtly I almost missed it. He canceled plans. Avoided talking about the future. Claimed work was overwhelming, that I was too intense when I talked about my dreams. But it wasn't work. It was pressure. The quiet, powerful kind, the kind that comes wrapped in silk gloves and sweet smiles. Then, one morning, it happened. A knock on the door. 3 officers stood outside. Are you Emma Carter? One asked. I nodded, heart already thudding. You're under investigation for fraudulent services. We need you to come with us. My legs gave out halfway down the porch steps. They said I was running an illegal business. That my palm readings were exploitative, deceptive. That I had taken large sums from vulnerable people. But I knew, this wasn't real. I had records. I had witnesses. I never charged more than a symbolic fee. I never promised false miracles. Still, they put me in handcuffs. At the station, I was kept in a holding cell for hours. No explanations. No calls allowed. No chance to tell my side. You'll be formally charged soon, an officer said. Start thinking about legal representation. I sat there, staring at the wall, trying to piece together what had just happened. And then I saw the newspaper on the desk outside my cell. My name. My face. The headline, Fake Fortune Teller Exploits Community, Police Investigate. I didn't need a vision to know who was behind it. Nathan's mother. It was too precise. Too coordinated. Someone with power, money, and the right friends in the right offices. I had embarrassed her, dared to sit at her table, dared to love her son, and this was her answer. In the cell that night, I didn't cry. But I shook. Not from fear, but from the weight of betrayal. The women in the cell weren't kind at first. Gypsy girl, huh? What did you do, curse someone's dog? Bet you saw this coming, didn't you? But I held my ground. Quiet. Calm. Until one of them, Tasha, asked if I could see anything in her hand. She was mocking me at first. But I took her hand anyway. You'll be out before the week ends, I told her, tracing the curve of her lifeline. Your public defender will surprise you. 3 days later, the charges against her were dropped. Her smile when she left was different, real. She pressed a candy bar into my hand. You're all right, she said. Word spread quickly. Even the guards started sneaking glances, asking quiet questions. One whispered to me in the hallway, my wife's pregnant. Can you tell if it's a boy? Eventually, I was taken to a private room. A man in a pressed uniform waited. The warden wants to see you, he said. I walked down the hall in borrowed shoes, hands still shaking. When I stepped into his office, I saw his disbelief before he said a word. I don't believe in any of this, he said flatly. I didn't ask you to, I replied. He held out his palm. Just humor me. I didn't touch it right away. I looked at his face. Tired. Hollow. A man carrying something heavy. You're going through a divorce, I said. She left because you wouldn't believe her when she told you she was hurting. You regret it now. And your daughter, she's sick. But the operation will be successful. She'll pull through. He didn't speak. Just stared at me like he'd forgotten how to blink. When he finally did, his voice was quiet. How do you know that? I don't. I just see what's already there. That night, I was moved to a separate cell. Cleaner. Quieter. I had access to books. Paper and pen. A hot meal. And the beginning of something that felt like hope. The truth always comes out, but not always by itself. Sometimes, you have to dig it up with your bare hands. And sometimes, it's hiding in the very people you once trusted the most. It was the prison warden, Richard Bennett, who changed everything. After our conversation, he started visiting regularly. At first under the pretense of checking on my well-being. Then, slowly, he began to ask questions that had nothing to do with prison regulations. Why would someone like you end up here? Who benefits from your silence? Who was your last reading before the arrest? The more I shared, the more his disbelief turned into something else. Anger. And then action. He had a lawyer friend. A serious one. A woman named Claire Jensen who had a reputation for unearthing buried truths. Within days, Claire was sitting across from me, papers spread across the plastic table. Your case stinks, she said. I've seen setups before, but this? This is personal. She dug through everything. My financial records. My calendar. My messages. The complaint that started it all? Anonymous, but traced back to a contact linked to Nathan's family's law firm. The witnesses? Paid. The evidence? Paper thin. You didn't just threaten them, Claire said. You humiliated them. And they struck back. I swallowed hard, my hands clenched on the cold table. Can we prove it? We can do more than that, she said. We can take them down. Meanwhile, in prison, my reputation grew. The guards brought their worries to me, sick kids, cheating spouses, job fears. I listened. I never charged. I just gave what I saw. One day, Officer Mallory pulled me aside. You said my son would get into that school. I didn't believe you. And? He got in. She grinned. Thank you. Even the hardest inmates, women who mocked me on my first night, now nodded when I walked past. But none of it changed the fact that I was still locked behind bars for a crime I didn't commit. Then, a break. Claire walked in with a thin man in an expensive coat. He introduced himself as Detective Harper. I owe Richard a favor, he said, referring to the warden. He asked me to dig a little deeper. And what he found blew the case open. A series of messages between Nathan's mother and a legal contact. Mentions of neutralizing the girl and protecting the family reputation. One file even detailed how they intended to discredit me slowly, through whispers, social media manipulation, and false witnesses. Claire filed the motions. Harper gave sworn statements. Richard called in every favor he had. And I waited. I waited as the gears of justice turned, slowly, loudly, grinding against the weight of wealth and influence. But when the news finally came, I didn't cry. I just closed my eyes and whispered, "Thank you." Because I was going home. The hardest part wasn't getting out, it was learning how to step back into the world that kept spinning without you. But when I opened the door to my parents' house, I realized not everything had moved on. My release came quietly, with no media, no flashing cameras, just a plain manila envelope and a train ticket back to the town that never forgave my name. Richard drove me to the station himself. You don't owe me anything, he said. But if you ever want to talk, about anything, I'll be around. I nodded, gripping the envelope that held the official papers, all charges dropped, all records sealed, my name technically clean. But technical didn't mean emotional. When I stepped off the train, I half expected no one to be there. But my mother was waiting. She looked smaller somehow, like life had been pressing down on her shoulders since the day I left. When she saw me, she didn't run or cry. She just walked up and put her hand to my cheek. I knew you'd come back, she whispered. I saw it. We rode home in silence, the kind that stretches between people who've lost time and don't know how to get it back. The house hadn't changed. The same chipped cabinets. The same mismatched plates. The chair my father always sat in, empty now. He had passed while I was still inside. My mother didn't tell me until we were home, sitting at the kitchen table. Her voice cracked when she said, he waited. Right up until the end. Said he believed in you more than anything. I didn't cry. I didn't have tears left. Just a heavy ache that settled into my bones like a second skeleton. But my mother kept talking. About how, after my arrest, no one came around. How people in town said I was a fraud, a disgrace, a shame. How she'd been cleaning 2 buildings a night to keep the house from falling apart. And then she said something I didn't expect. Richard helped, she said softly. He paid for the last few months of your father's care. Richard. The prison warden. The man who didn't believe in me, until he did. A week later, he showed up at our door. Not in uniform. Just jeans and a button-down shirt, holding flowers that looked like they came from a gas station. He looked nervous. I didn't know if this was welcome, he said. My mother smiled and let him in. That night, we sat on the porch, the same porch where I used to stare at the stars and wonder if I'd ever escape this place. Now I sat beside the man who helped me get free. We didn't talk much. We didn't have to. A few weeks passed. Then months. Richard started coming around more. Fixing leaky pipes. Bringing over food. Reading with my mother. He didn't push. He didn't pretend. He just was. And slowly, I let myself imagine a different kind of future. One where I didn't have to be the girl who warned others. One where I could be loved without suspicion. One where my name meant survivor, not scandal. One night, as I sat outside watching the moon, Richard joined me and said, "You know, my daughter still talks about you. She says you saved her life." I looked at him. I didn't save her. I just gave her hope. He smiled. Same thing. Freedom isn't truly freedom if your name is still dragged through the dirt. I thought being released would be the end, but clearing your name takes more courage than surviving prison. Especially when the ones who hurt you still wear polished shoes and practiced smiles. Even after the charges were dropped, the whispers didn't stop. Back in town, people crossed the street when they saw me. Shopkeepers gave tight smiles. Parents pulled their kids a little closer. I wasn't a prisoner anymore, but I still wore a different kind of sentence. "Give it time," my mother said. "They'll come around." But I knew better. So did Claire, my lawyer. She called one morning, her voice sharp and energized. "We're not finished," she said. "You deserve more than a quiet dismissal. You deserve justice." "What does that mean?" I asked. "It means we're suing." She filed a defamation and malicious prosecution case against Nathan's mother, her law firm, and the police department that enabled it. We had evidence, emails, phone calls, false statements, the anonymous tip traced back to their office. Claire laid it out like a map, and every road led back to them. "They wanted you humiliated," she said. "They built a case designed to break you. Now we build one that breaks them." The lawsuit caused a storm. Nathan's family tried to spin it, of course. Claimed they were protecting their son. That I had manipulated powerful people. That my kind preyed on the desperate. But this time, I had a voice. Claire set up a press conference. I stood beside her, nervous but ready. I looked into the flashing cameras and said what I'd never dared to say before. "My name is Emma Carter. I have a gift. I've used it to help people, not for money, not for fame, but because it's the only thing that's ever made me feel like I belonged. I was falsely accused. I was silenced. I was locked away. And now I'm here to tell you, I will not be silent anymore." The video went viral. Suddenly, I wasn't just a fortune teller from a small town. I was a woman who'd been wronged, who fought back, who stood her ground when the world told her to fold. Nathan never showed up in court. His mother did, flanked by lawyers in $1,000 suits. But she didn't have truth on her side. We won. The court awarded damages, enough to rebuild everything they'd tried to take from me. More importantly, a judge stood and said in open court, the plaintiff was maliciously targeted and wrongfully prosecuted. There is no evidence she committed any fraud. Only that she embarrassed powerful people. The newspapers ran with it. The same ones that called me a criminal now called me a symbol of resilience. People in town started looking at me differently. Not all of them. But some. The ones who mattered. Even the ones who used to mock me now stopped me in the market. "I'm sorry," one woman whispered, barely meeting my eyes. I believed what they said. I was wrong. I didn't gloat. I didn't smile. I just nodded. Because the truth isn't about revenge. It's about healing what they tried to break. They tried to destroy me with lies, and I came out stronger. But love? That was a risk I wasn't sure I could take again. Until he reminded me that not every man runs when things get complicated, some stay, and help you rebuild. Richard never pushed. After my release, he checked in, helped when asked, and disappeared when he saw me overwhelmed. He understood something that few did, how the silence after a storm can feel louder than the thunder itself. He never brought up the day I read his palm. Never asked how I knew about his daughter, his divorce, the guilt he carried like a scar on his soul. He just showed up. When the heater broke, when my mother needed a ride to the clinic, when I forgot how to laugh. He didn't love the part of me that could see things, he loved the part that tried not to. One day, as we were walking the overgrown path behind my father's old workshop, I asked, "Why are you still here?" He didn't pretend to misunderstand. "Because you didn't run when you could have. You stood up for yourself when everyone tried to bury you. And because my daughter still asks when we're going to see the lady who told the truth." I smiled for the first time in what felt like forever. It started slow. Dinner once a week. Then twice. Walks by the lake. Late night phone calls that ended with quiet, good nights, and the sound of each other's breathing. My mother liked him. She never said it outright, but I noticed the way she smiled when his name came up, or the way she set an extra plate without asking. She even started calling him Richard instead of that man, which in her language was basically a blessing. His daughter, Lily, adored me. She followed me around the house, asking about the cards, about my dreams, about the stars. She wasn't afraid of the things other people feared in me. She was curious. Gentle. Open. One night, as she braided my hair, she whispered, "You feel like a second mom." I didn't cry. But I held her hand a little tighter. Our wedding was quiet. Just us, Lily, my mother, and a few close friends who stood by me through the worst. No white dress, no cake taller than a toddler, no string quartet. Just candlelight, laughter, and a promise. That this time, I was marrying someone who didn't care about my past, only the life we could build from it. I wore my father's watch around my wrist and my mother's red thread around my ankle. Not because I believed I still needed protection, but because I finally believed I was safe. I used to believe I'd always be the outsider, the girl who people feared, who no one truly let in. But when you start building your life with the right people, every brick tells a story. And this time, it was mine to tell. Our house wasn't big. Just a modest 2-bedroom with creaky floors and windows that let in too much sun in the summer. But it was ours. And more than that, it was peaceful. I decorated it with care, curtains my mother helped me sew, wildflowers Lily picked from the backyard, shelves full of books, and a small wooden table that sat in the corner where I still read poems. Not for money anymore, just for people I cared about. Friends. Family. Sometimes myself, when I needed clarity more than comfort. Richard turned the basement into a workspace, part office, part sanctuary. He still worked with the prison system, but now focused on rehabilitation programs. People deserve more than punishment, he often said. They deserve a path back. I understood that more than anyone. Lily thrived. She started calling me M at first, then one day, without ceremony, Mom. I didn't correct her. I just kissed her forehead and held her a little longer that night. My mother eventually moved in with us. Her arthritis made it hard to get around, and truth be told, we all needed each other more than we'd admit. She still had moments when her eyes would get distant and she'd whisper things in Romani I didn't always understand. But she was proud. I could see it in the way she introduced me at the market. My daughter, Emma. The one they couldn't break. I started school again. Night classes. Psychology, mythology, even small business management. Not because I needed a degree to prove anything, but because I wanted to keep learning, to give my daughter an example of what growth looks like even when it's late in the game. One afternoon, I stood in the mirror, brushing my hair, and I paused. I didn't see the scared girl who had once been dragged into a cell. I didn't see the Gypsy the town whispered about. I saw a woman. A wife. A mother. A survivor. That fall, I hosted a small community event in our backyard. Bonfire, warm cider, music from a friend who played the violin like it held secrets. Neighbors came. Some awkwardly. Others with genuine warmth. A woman who had once signed a petition to remove my services from the town square approached me. My daughter says you helped her through her panic attacks, she murmured. I didn't know. I'm sorry. I didn't absolve her. But I thanked her for showing up. That night, as Richard and I stood under the stars, arms around each other, Lily roasting marshmallows beside my mother, I whispered. This is what we build when we stop apologizing for who we are. He kissed the top of my head. And when we finally believe we deserve it. They called me the Gypsy's daughter. They called me a fraud, a liar, a danger. But in the end, I wasn't just the girl who knew the future, I was the woman who created her own. It happened on an ordinary Tuesday. The doctor smiled, handed me the blurry image, and said, "Congratulations." I stared at the ultrasound in stunned silence. My hand trembled. Not out of fear, but disbelief. I'm really? 10 weeks, the doctor confirmed. Healthy heartbeat. A child. A new life. I walked out of the clinic into the late autumn wind, the red thread my mother had tied around my ankle fluttering in my shoe. I held the image to my chest and smiled. At home, I found Richard in the kitchen, sleeves rolled up, humming off-key while stirring soup. Hey, babe, he said, turning. How'd the appointment go? I held up the photo. He froze. Took 2 steps forward. Then wrapped his arms around me so tightly I thought I might float. That night, we told Lily. She squealed, jumped into my arms, and declared herself the best big sister ever. My mother cried softly. Another who sees the world differently, she whispered. This child will be powerful. Loved. I didn't fear that legacy anymore. I welcomed it. Months passed. The town changed. The people who once whispered now smiled. The bakery left an extra roll in my bag. The florist named a bouquet after me. The mayor asked me to speak at the local school about resilience. I said yes. Not because I needed to be accepted, but because I knew there were other girls sitting quietly in the back of classrooms, wondering if who they were would ever be enough. I told them, they may never stop talking. But you don't have to stop living. When our baby came, a girl, we named her Grace. And holding her for the first time, I understood everything my mother had ever sacrificed. Everything I'd ever survived. Every chain I'd broken. Every truth I'd spoken when the world tried to silence me. Grace had her father's calm and my mother's eyes. And when she wrapped her tiny fingers around mine, I whispered a promise I would spend the rest of my life keeping. You will never have to shrink to fit into someone else's idea of who you should be. They used to laugh at the girl who saw the future. But I became the woman who built one, honestly, fiercely, and with a heart full of love. And that, I finally understood, was the most powerful gift of all.